You're watching Beyond Markets. Welcome. I'm Esther Awuni. Many thanks for joining us. Coming up on today's show, we'll discuss how to create a culture of African technology innovation. You can join all our conversations. Send us tweets to @CNBC Africa. You can also follow me at Esther O. Awuni. Use the hashtag Beyond Markets. Now, a lot has been said about the opportunities technology has to offer African economies, but how can African countries be more deliberate and proactive about creating a culture that drives technological innovation and move from consumers of technology to creating homegrown solutions? Ade Atobatele, a technology entrepreneur, joins me now to discuss this. Ade, thank you so much. Pleasure to have you. Now, the conversations are ongoing about how Africa should begin to decide how it wants to drive its own technological innovations, especially in the area of providing homegrown solutions and African solutions, made for Africans. So what are your thoughts in terms of where we are right now? Perhaps we can start from the area of leapfrogging, because that is one area that has also taken center stage, how we as an African, as a people, have the opportunity now through technology to leapfrog.
Technology is always evolving. They teach us in economics that you use your cash that you're generating now to build products for the future. It's unfortunate that, at least in Nigeria, I don't know, I can't say for the whole of Africa, that we're not very big into research and development. Because if we were big into research and development, we would already have a pipeline of things that we would be using the cash that we're having now from whatever, whether it's agriculture, whether it's oil, or whether it's just even taxation, to build things for the future. And this pipeline would have already existed. And this would be a natural process. But given that it isn't a natural process, we now need to start looking at what are the technologies of the future, not the technologies of today. Even if we're saying that we're using the technologies that exist to make future products, it's the question of what are our needs going to be in the future so that we grow into something. And as I said, that is always what has been lacking. We have university students that really, you should not be able to get a master's or a PhD without new research. So, and if you think about the number of master's or PhD students that we are generating every year, there should be a huge body of research that can be used to think about the future. We're not aggregating this. As we always do in Nigeria, we do things in silos. So you can't go online and say, who has investigated this, and find the papers and the scientific papers and the educational papers and all of that, and then aggregate knowledge and say, oh, this is where the gem comes from. But this is what happens in other societies. It doesn't suddenly drop out of the sky. There is a process that people are taking. So for us now, because we don't do that, we've got to look elsewhere and say, what are these new technologies that are already out there?
Well, what about all the innovation through technology that's still going on, right here in Nigeria? I mean, we have the ICT hubs. We know that there are a lot of young guys and girls, women out there who are, making things happen and actually disrupting the space. And I'm thinking that's why those ICT hubs were created themselves. And some things are actually happening there.
Well, I mentored at least two of these ICT hubs that you're talking about. I was in CC Hub from, I think it was 2012 to 2014, and I was in Idea Hub from 2014 to 2015. I'm not so sure that we're actually disrupting. I know, in fact, that when the first set of people that I came across in the hubs, their initial problem was not innovating, it was trust. We come from an environment where collaboration is not the idea. It's we all sit in silos. We're basically traders, and it's a cash on delivery based economy. So the question that they all asked was, if I tell you my idea in public, what is to stop the next man stealing it? And it took a long while, especially in CC Hub. It took at least about 6 months to a year before the initial question that everybody asked was, how do I stop this doing? And then because people had aggregated themselves there and they were seeing each other every day, people started to trust each other. And from that collaboration of trust came the things that you are now talking about. But the thing that was also lacking in this environment was you do not create a company just on technology. There are so many other things that make a company work. The administration and the understanding the human resources issues and all of that. And we were finding that a lot of these young people were coming with ideas, but they didn't have the experience of working in a structured environment to understand that it wasn't just coding that was going to grieve the innovations. So if you look back over from 2012 up to date, you may find that a number of the organizations that have disrupted have not necessarily come out of incubators, but they have come out of from people that have worked in other companies, both here and abroad, and have brought that knowledge of business to technology to create a proper, sustainable company.
Okay, so I mean, still on the issue of, creating that culture of tech innovation. Where should we start? You've talked about the fact that we have poor research and development. Yes, that has been established, but we also can agree that there's still some innovation going on. So I'm thinking perhaps at the secondary school, primary, secondary, tertiary education level, what should we be doing at those levels to begin to, at least for the young ones that are coming up, giving them that solid foundation, and as you mentioned, doing research for things that we would need in the future?
Well, I'm glad you pointed it out that way. So our real problem is, how do we create a pipeline, and how do we actually utilize a pipeline going forward? So let's come back to what you were talking about, which is how do we create the pipeline? Fortunately, the word STEM has become prevalent in education today. So yes, there are a number of STEM processes and STEM conferences and STEM people around that are pushing this into the educational thing. Unfortunately, it all seems to be coming from the private sector. It does not seem to be a government-driven thing yet. The government does not seem to be able to be the catalyst that it should be, because it still sees things as I need to put something down in a school, as opposed to I need to put something down in a region. They haven't been able to use, the government itself has not been able to use technology to meet the needs of masses of people. So you will find that there are private schools or foundations that are helping small areas, but I don't see the government using the cloud, which would reach everybody, poor, young or old, to deliver educational products that would move the STEM type things forward. And that's how you reach the masses in a country of 200 million people. Reaching a few people here or there it's like dropping acid into an ocean and believe that it's going to become an acid bath. It isn't going to happen. The effect is diluted very, very quickly. The government needs to find bulk ways of delivering these things to both rich and poor, privileged and unprivileged. As long as it's there, available to people, people will tap into it. But that's not the concept that we're using. So we don't have masses of people as a pipeline. And because innovation is one of those things that there are going to be large failures along the line, what you need to have is a huge pipeline. So when the failures come, if only 1% are successful, you have a large pipeline to move forward. But as I said, if all you are doing is that 1% from the beginning, by the time you get to the end of your pipeline, it's almost zero that you have successful. So there are efforts, but the typical way we do in Nigeria, they're not coordinated.
So you're not, what you see on the ground doesn't inspire you. You're not too hopeful in terms of how we can maybe move at a faster pace?
Definitely not inspired. I mean, look at that. We often use Andela as an example. Well, Andela was looking to get a number of people. I think it was 5,000 or is it 10,000 or 1,000 people? But what they also did now was spur other people to copy. There are a number of Mandelas that are out there now. But this was a private sector thing. There's no equivalent of the idea of generating that sort of number from a government perspective. The nearest that we've got is Lagos State. One state out of 36 plus a federal capital. And I'm with all kudos to Lagos State. Lagos is not going to drive the whole country forward. And even if it does, we then have ethnic strife. We said there's only one part of the country that is doing well or whatever. And so the federal government needs to get in on the act.
So are you talking about policy now, from policy perspective?
Well, with Lagos State, it was more than policy. They actually put these things on the ground and are now educating people along these lines. They're giving loans, they're doing this. And there are, rather than it be a CC hub, which is a private organization which has limited resources, no matter how well their intentions, they can never do what a government can do. They can never reach the number of people that a government can do. And so I'm saying that Lagos State is doing that, but how many people can Lagos State, even with the best of intentions, reach for a whole country? We are Nigerians first. And when I carry a passport, it doesn't say from Lagos, it says from Nigeria. And as I said, one area doing a little bit eventually is going to create an imbalance. And so it's the federal government's job to do what people like CC Hub have done, what Lagos State are doing, and the federal government doesn't seem to be able to get their act together.
And they will just hold that thought for us. We'll take a quick break and we'll come back and pick up from where we left off. Thank you for your time so far. I've been speaking to Ade Atobatele, technology entrepreneur, of course, looking at how we can create a culture of African technology innovation. Still with me on today's show is Ade Atobatele, a technology entrepreneur. Ade, thank you for your time so far. Now, very interesting point you made there just before we went on the break. Of course, a state like Lagos State in the forefront of the ICT drive, but I know that a couple of other states too are picking up on that. But perhaps, and you've also talked about the fact that the drive should come from the federal government, from the federal level. And I do know that the federal government at that level has done a couple of things through the Ministry of Technology. So for you, to close that chapter, is it more of, do you want to see better policies coming from the federal government? Is it better funding? Is it the right body language and the right level of commitment to say that, yes, as a federal government, at the federal level, we are committed to supporting states, we're committed to supporting the tech environment to ensure that our youth have all the support they need for innovation?
The federal government needs to have policies that can benefit both the rich and the poor. The federal government needs to have policies that allow low-cost access to whatever it is the federal government is acting as a catalyst for. If you go onto DSTV, the South Africans have an educational channel, which means as long as you can access DSTV, you can access the channel. Now, not everybody can access the channel because not everybody will have DSTV, but think about the numbers that can. There are no silver bullets. There are no one solution, but there are solutions that can meet a large demographic. And what we're doing right now are reaching small demographics, so we're not getting the right return on investment. The government needs to think more of how can I reach millions of people? How can I be a catalyst to millions of people at the same time? Not a few thousand, not a few tens of thousands, but millions. You reach 1 million people in Nigeria, you have reached less than 10%.
Don't you think that perhaps that would be more effective if the federal government had good partnership with the private sector? Because you know that many times at the end of the day, the private sector can go a little bit further in some aspects than the federal government can.
Put in an educational program on radio, which is the lowest common denominator channel for reaching the masses, does not require massive private investment. It requires foresight from the government. It is the foresight that is lacking. It isn't the public. It isn't the private. Whatever. The voice of the BBC voice of the Hausa thing that the BBC does reaches more people than anybody in Nigeria reaches, and they have influence. If they decided that that was going to be used to educate, that channel was going to be used to educate people, they would reach more people than any institution inside Nigeria tomorrow. At what cost? Almost a zero marginal cost. The government does not have foresight. It is not always that the private sector must put money into things. It's the government asking themselves, how can I reach my citizens who I have a responsibility for at a mass level, not at an ethnic level, not at a regional level, not at a school level, but at a mass level, so all people can benefit.
Okay, now I wanted to quickly talk to you about this. The Nigeria Innovation Summit that was held last month, where of course stakeholders in industry came together, and they did come up with some recommendations at the end of that summit. I'll just mention a few of them. Now, the first one at the fore was that to build a culture of innovation in Nigeria, we must build strong institutions that will nurture and grow these innovations, strengthen and reposition the existing institutions. I mean, obviously that is key, but I'm just thinking, what are your thoughts in terms of how we've been able to achieve that?
When people usually use these nebulous words like institutions, I always say, what institutions? What institutions, what sort of it? The only one that immediately comes to mind is the institution where intellectual property is respected and has value. If intellectual property, our intellectual property laws are archaic. They are not for the future. They were barely usable in the past. What we need to do, if we're talking about leapfrogging, is really think about how we can modify those intellectual property laws to deal with digital assets. Because all the major assets, apart from our oil and our agriculture, are going to be digital in the future. And our archaic laws do not deal with those things. So the first institution that I would believe that needs to be done is the one that will provide investors and innovators with a sense of calm that what I'm doing is going to be protected. So therefore, it is worth me putting my effort, my time, my resources, my money into this thing because there will be a reward.
Now, this also caught my eye. The summit says that it has developed a strategic plan to harvest innovations in all geopolitical zones in the country and address the issue of innovation deficit through a nationwide or nationwide innovation challenge, as it were.
I wish them well.
What do you think about that?
You see, we talk a lot, we execute little. I would not say that first of all, the statement is exactly what is needed, and I would give them all the help and prayers that they would need, but collaboration in Nigeria isn't easy.
Now, innovation, tech innovation, that is happening all over the continent. Do you, looking at Nigeria, do you think that we can take a leadership role, as it were, in terms of the quality of innovation, the level of innovation, and the policies that support these innovations going into the future?
We have archaic ideas driving new regulation. Let me give you an example. CBN puts out a paper recently about how to manage fintech. And inside the paper, it says, if you don't have 50 million naira shareholding, or you don't have 100 million naira shareholding, or you don't have 500 million naira shareholding, you're not going to get a license. So I asked myself a question, and I said, normally, a central bank would be asking a company for a share limit based on risk. Where is the risk in the fintech companies since they're not holding anybody's money? So what is your business in asking what their shareholding is? Archaic thinking driving new innovation. How is that going to work? The fintech companies, the list of it's on the website, you could think what they're going to do. Not one single one of them can go broke and lose your money. So why do I suddenly have to have a massive shareholding before I can do the digital innovation that is available to me that could benefit the country? So here we are, a situation where the regulator, who by the way is the government, is now stifling innovation while they are believing that they're actually promoting it. So anybody that was at a low level in one of these incubators that you are thinking about, that definitely does not have access to 100 million naira, immediately thinks to themselves, this is not for me. So that wonderful idea that was bubbling in the incubator suddenly dies.
Let's hear your, I mean, we have about 5 minutes left. Your recommendations, where do we start in terms of nurturing that culture of innovation and technology? What are those things that we need to get on right now?
We need to look at places that have decided that they want to leapfrog, and ask ourselves that what were they trying to do when they did that? I mean, there's Malta, for example, now, a small island that is smaller than the local government of Shomolu, has decided that it will be the fintech capital of Europe, blah, blah, blah. So it's now passing blockchain laws as a country. And that invites in innovation. It provides a platform. It provides security. So we have got to start asking that, not what is happening today, but how are we going to provide this platform to be able to compete globally, not just locally. And it does not come from using yesterday's rules on tomorrow's problems. People who know me well will know that I always ask the question, why do we use yesterday's systems to solve tomorrow's problems? The thinking has to change and understand that tomorrow's problems will not be solved by yesterday's
Okay, so
systems.
for you, change of mindset, better policies,
yes,
better supporting policies. Now, we've talked a lot about the fourth industrial revolution and how ready Africa is to embrace this and the threat it could have to, concerning jobs, for instance, and the threat of also exclusion and how it could benefit one segment of the society if those who are the lower rung, as it were, do not have access to technology and the benefits that innovation brings. What are your thoughts in terms of how, as a country and perhaps as a continent, we're preparing for that, the fourth industrial revolution?
The government must understand that in terms of the fourth revolution, it is the deadliest thing that can happen to us. Let me give you an example. We want to apply 5G. Well, with 5G transmitters, they have to be a lot closer to each other than 4G or 3G. We don't have electricity. So you're going down an Ibadan expressway, and there's no electricity in large chunks of the road, and all of a sudden your 5G doesn't work because you can't have transmitters once every 200 meters as opposed to once every 10 kilometers, where you can now put a generator and a mast. If we don't understand that the technology is not going to wait for us and prepare for it, we will become yesterday's citizens, even with the best of intentions. So our government has always been the provider of infrastructure. We need to understand that there are basic infrastructures that are needed to allow us to even contemplate being a platform for new technology. And as you've rightly pointed out, the 5G and the IoT and all of this technology that is maybe just 10 years down the road also works on collaboration. It's the major collaborative technology. If we as a people do not have the mindset change that we should work with each other, and why don't we have that? Well, we are still stuck in a silo mentality of money for hand, back for ground. If we don't get past that and say we need to put our hands together so that our aggregated resources are bigger than the cumulative resources, we won't get very far. And as I said, the government needs to help us along those lines. We need good leadership that shows that collaboration is the way to go. And if you look around yourself in day-to-day things, it isn't just about technology. We've got to figure out how we want to grow as a people. Because when we can grow as a people, the concept of collaboration becomes easy. But if I don't believe that you have my best intentions, or even if you don't, I have a way to enforce my rights, then I don't deal with you, and I stay in my silo.
All right, thank you so much, Ade, for your time today. We appreciate you being on the show.
You're welcome.
I've been speaking to Ade Atobatele, technology entrepreneur, looking at how we can create a culture of African technology innovation. Well, that's all for today's show. As always, you can watch all previous episodes of Beyond Markets on our website at cnbcafrica.com. You can also stay engaged with the hashtag Beyond Markets, and you can follow my Twitter handle too at Esther O Awoni. Do have a wonderful evening. Thanks for watching.